We did it.
Are you surprised that she did it? The pundits and pollsters sure are. They were predicting Jim Florio by 9 or 10 percentage points. But 51% of those who went to the polls yesterday chose Republican Christine Todd Whitman as our first female governor. And tonight, we want to hear what you have to say about Whitman's upset victory over the Democratic incumbent. Our guest is David Rebovich, Associate Professor of Political Science at Rider College and Associate Dean of Liberal Arts and Science. Our number is 1-800-323-8852. Again, that's 1-800-323-8852. Professor Rebovich, welcome back.
It's nice to be here. I must confess to being tired after a long night doing election analysis.
So am I. I'm going on coffee right now. That's what's keeping me going. So are you expecting to hear the words Governor-elect Whitman at the end of last night?
No, I was surprised. I think like lots of people, I said, what happened after looking at the results coming in. And I'll tell you, one of the key words in this campaign was credibility. And I think the day after the election, many folks are asking themselves if there's a political commentator in the state who has credibility at this stage.
You have to wonder what the pollsters are doing if they're having these massive meetings today about what they need to do next in terms of methodology.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, folks are asking some questions. And the professional pollsters tell us that a poll is simply a snapshot in time, and things can change. External events, actions by one candidate or the other, changes in the broader political environment and so on can move public opinion. But this is really surprising that in a 5-day period, Mrs. Whitman moved from roughly 10 points down, according to two major polls, to the victory.
So what happened?
I think a couple of things went on, and Dave Blomquist was on NJN News this evening, and mentioned that people, when asked by pollsters how they're going to vote, will frequently give answers that are not clearly thought out, will fall prey to political correctness.
I actually meant in terms of what happened in this race. Why did Jim Florio, who was expected to win by 9 or 10 points, fall short, as he put it last night?
Let's ask a prior question. Okay. And we have to remember that Jim Florio was not expected to win this election until about September, when the polls started suggesting that he was in the lead, or that this was going to be a very competitive race.
That's right.
Yeah, so that's part of it. Then, of course, his candidacy generated some momentum as Mrs. Whitman's campaign languished. When Mrs. Whitman came back and put into effect her original candidate's concept, emphasizing her role as the new political persona on the state's political scene, focusing on connecting with New Jerseyans more directly, the bus tour in the last couple of weeks of the campaign, and emphasizing that she did represent a different view of public policy, cutting taxes and spending, things came into place. For the majority, did that campaign affect the majority of Jerseyans the last 2 weeks? No. But the focus of the Whitman campaign was on the 20% of New Jerseyans who were undecided, and apparently she moved enough of those voters to win the election.
So what did Jim Florio do wrong? Did he hammer too much on the NRA? Were there not enough commercials showing Jim Florio talking, as there were commercials showing Christy Whitman simply speaking?
I have to think this one through a little bit more clearly, but I'm going to stick with my immediate reaction to this. I don't think Florio ran a bad campaign. I think he ran a clever campaign, a substantively vacuous one, too, by the way. Maybe we'll get into that a little bit later. I think the Florio folks did all they could do. They didn't have much room to maneuver, and still got 48% of the vote. He had to avoid talking about the issue of the economy and taxes because the record was not particularly impressive. The strategy worked right up until 3 or 4 days before the election. I don't think I have many regrets about the campaign. I have regrets about the results.
I'm going to ask you this question, and I also want to ask this of our viewers tonight. I want to know if the voters never did end up forgiving Jim Florio for his $2.8 billion tax package of several years ago, because it seemed that at least toward the end of the campaign that there were people who were getting past that, moving on with that. But last night...
when Whitman introduced the theme of change into the campaign, again at the very end, which was important, she started asking voters, don't you really think the next 4 years can be better with a change in the office of the governor? And apparently that question resonated with a certain number of New Jerseyans who said, yeah, maybe change is the way to go. We think we can do even a little bit better with a new governor.
You have to wonder what President Clinton is thinking about today.
I think he's thinking about the health care reform package and not talking too much about these results and what they may mean for Americans' perceptions of him.
Well, he likened it to what happened to him in the election,
Right.
and the fact that the voters showed that they wanted change.
Right.
But, you know, he had to be hoping that Jim Florio, who raised taxes,
Right.
would be able to pull this through.
I'll tell you, I'm one of those who thought, though, even if Florio won, it was not necessarily a validation of the Clinton presidency or the direction of the nation that the president may want to take us in.
Okay, again, from our viewers tonight, I want to know how you feel this day after the election. Did you think it was going to go the way that it did? And if not, why not? And if so, why? So give us a call here at 1-800-323-8852. Let's get down to business. Christy Whitman has said that when she first assumes office, she is going to tackle that tax cut promise that she made right away. And the question is, can she do it?
She'll need a lot of help. She'll need some cooperation from the Republican leadership in the legislature. And of course, we know the GOP does have control of the legislature, not the veto-proof majorities that they had in the previous term, but nonetheless, she'll have folks who will be cooperative, at least on the surface. The tensions that are likely to occur are among Republicans who represent older suburban districts which are heavily dependent on state aid to municipalities to keep those property taxes down. Donnie DeFrancesco, the Senate president, said yesterday, we're going to have to talk to Mrs. Whitman, about the proposed tax cuts. We're going to have to work very carefully. On the other hand, Chuck Hytine, the Speaker of the Assembly, who has a keen eye for making cuts in the budget, will probably be a valuable assistance to the new governor as she is looking for places in the state operating budget to cut.
Well, before we go to the phone calls, just one comment. I talked to Don DeFrancesco myself last night on our air, and he called her plan a proposal, not a promise, and said that he would look into it, but by no means, said that it was a done deal. So
Right.
it's a long road for that.
Yeah, that makes sense, and that's smart politics. And the funny thing is, exit polls suggested that most Jerseyans don't really believe that a 30% income tax cut can be enacted over 3 years, but felt that Mrs. Whitman would at least attempt to cut taxes and spending, and that Governor Florio would not be so aggressive in that regard. And it helped her. The tax plan ended up helping her, as it turns out.
All right, to the phones we go. Mike in Bloomfield, hello.
Yes, good evening, Mary. Again, a good show.
Oh, thank you, Mike.
A couple of questions.
Okay.
First of all, I noticed in the last 3 or 4 weeks there was not a single bumper sticker on any automobile for re-elect Florio. And that told me that he was not going to get elected. But the second thing is that people are dissatisfied, and they will vote the incumbents out. They have proven that, and they will do it time and time again. But the main thing is that everybody is cut back except government, and Florio did not. He would not cut back. He did cut a little bit here and there, but all his friends got in and all of that. But the
You sound like
thing
a
is,
Whitman supporter.
excuse me?
Did you vote for Christie?
Yes, I did.
So-
Only because I don't believe in making the comment that Florio made, that he made the hard decisions of raising taxes. The hard decisions are cutting costs. Thank you.
Thanks. Hey, one more question for you, Mike. Did you expect Mrs. Whitman to win yesterday?
Yes, I did. And I expected Giuliano to win, too.
Okay.
in New
Why
York.
is that? Despite everything that we hear who are on the air and in the newspapers and et cetera, why did you expect her to win anyway? I'm curious.
Only because the people are dissatisfied. They're not happy with what's going on.
And perhaps
Okay.
some of us are out of touch.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks, Mike.
thanks.
He posed an interesting point, and that was the fact that there weren't, at least I haven't seen re-elect Florio bumper stickers. Is that a fault of the campaign?
Well, the campaign depended on the electronic media for most of its advertising. I saw a few Florio bumper stickers in
Did you?
in Mercer County. Not many signs. Signs were not so popular this particular go-round.
Wonder why. Lee in Arlington, you're next. Hello, Lee.
What I want to know, when one goes in to vote, one is put into a booth, you pull the lever and the curtains go around you, and how you vote is a secret.
Yes.
You get outside of the booth and somebody approaches you and says, who did you vote for?
They want to know it's an exit poll.
I mean, that's my business, is it not? I mean, I don't mind being questioned before a campaign and after an election is over with, but don't question me on election day.
Lee has a problem with exit polls. And you know what was interesting yesterday? I was there. I was stationed at Whitman headquarters for our coverage last night, and all the reporters are trying to get some feel of how things were going early on. And we hadn't heard much about exit polls this year. And I don't know if this is fairly new, but I know they've been criticized in the past because supposedly they can help to sway elections. And I didn't know if that was anything different this year.
Well, the networks have agreed not to report the results of exit polls until the voting booths are closed. Of course, this caller could have refused to answer questions at the exit poll, and you're not asked your name. So it's, doesn't seem to be that big of an issue. I would have appreciated some exit poll results earlier on. Again, it was a difficult night tracking the election, waiting for the returns, and I tell you, even doing the analysis, now you folks here face a similar problem. We were waiting to see if the results from the New Jersey's big cities, where Democrats traditionally do very well, were coming in, because despite the fact that Whitman had a small lead throughout the evening, I think most analysts still anticipated Florio doing well when the urban vote came in.
Fred in South Plainfield.
Well, now that Whitman is in office with the same kind of promises that Florio had, is she going to have the same rude awakening that he had several years ago?
That is an interesting question.
That's a good question. Of course, we see the newspapers already reporting that the state may face up to a $1.3 billion deficit in the next fiscal year.
And then on top of that, the state Supreme Court could say, Mrs. Whitman, you've got to shell out $450 million somehow to bring spending
education
up to parity,
spending,
yes, between rich and poor districts.
So you have pressure on both sides, raising revenues and having to spend more money for education, and then the campaign promise or proposal to cut the state income tax is an additional burden. What really troubles me the most is, and that's why I get very nervous. I got nervous when the Republicans 2 years ago in the legislative races promised to cut the sales tax, and Whitman came out with this rather extraordinary promise or proposal to cut the income tax. Is she'll walk into office, she'll look at the numbers, they'll hit her right in the face. Her aides and advisors will say this is going to be very, very difficult, and it will be difficult. Most New Jerseyans would want to give a new governor a chance, and I certainly want to do that, to tackle the difficult problems that are facing the state. But the political environment will have already been poisoned to a certain extent, and Jerseyans may have been set up for yet another disappointment, which will only reinforce the political cynicism that already exists in this state. I wish she never made the promise to cut those taxes, and rather surprised voters by saving us some tax dollars once she got into office.
Do you think she'll be able to achieve even a small tax decrease?
Well, it depends on economic trends, but here we go into the spin already, and I hope we can avoid it. I don't want to hear the new administration telling us that the old administration put us in dire straits, or that a national recession is the cause of our revenue woes, so therefore you can't get that promised tax cut. Why don't we just put the state's fiscal house in order, balance the budget, seek some fiscal stability. I mean, most Jerseyans want long-term fiscal stability, not a short-term tax cut that makes them happy until the next election.
Our next stop is Plainsboro, and Iris.
Yes, hi.
Hello.
I was wondering whether Christy Whitmer is going to address the subject of oxygenated fuel. It was a subject that she was mute on during the campaign, and several members of our group, I represent the Oxybusters of New Jersey, several members of our group had tried to talk to her at several call-in shows, and every time we tried to get through, we seemed to get disconnected. And we're concerned that our topic is not being addressed.
What can she possibly do about that issue? Because the state is under a federal mandate.
Federal mandate. Well, you deal with Washington, with your congressional representatives and the Clinton administration. And I'll tell you the truth, Washington has expressed a certain amount of interest and concern in the concerns of our caller here. I won't be surprised to see some modifications in that policy area.
I'd like to delve some more into why Governor Florio did not do as well as expected, and so I'm going to bring into the conversation now Miguel Perez, who joins us via telephone. He is a columnist for The Record of Hackensack and also our host here at NJN of Images Imágenes. Miguel, welcome.
Hi, Mary. Nice to be on your program.
Nice to hear from you tonight. So why did the governor not do well in the urban areas of the state, as well as expected, I should say?
Well, it comes down to numbers, and I've been looking, when you called this afternoon and asked me to be on your program, I started to looking at the towns where minorities live, and I discovered, especially in North Jersey, that Florio won all of these towns where minorities live in large numbers, and that is Inglewood, Hackensack, Teaneck, North Bergen, Passaic, Patterson. Florio won in all those towns. In fact, we're running a chart in the Bergen Record tomorrow, town by town, with the breakdown.
Now, I might have a mistaken impression. I know that he took many of the urban areas, but my understanding was that he could have done better. Am I wrong in that?
No, you're absolutely right. And the subject here that we should be dealing with is the turnout. He didn't inspire as many voters to go out and vote, and that is where perhaps the difference lies between now and 4 years ago, when Florio did much better, because Latinos and blacks felt a need because their needs were being addressed by the candidates. This year, the minorities have been invisible in this gubernatorial race.
Truly.
And that is, I think, what's making the difference. Why didn't the urban areas vote for Florio or Whitman in large numbers? Because they didn't pay attention to those urban areas.
So both campaigns failed, in your opinion?
Right, the Democratic campaign as well. Governor Florio spoke very little about New Jersey cities and the needs that typically confront residents of those cities who may be Hispanic Americans and African Americans. But you know, Miguel, we were told that the Florio camp was going to make up for the failure to talk about policy issues by having 18,000 workers on Election Day devote most of their efforts and energy to getting the vote out in the cities. Was it your sense that the Democrats did a good job of using street money and street workers to get the vote out?
No. My sense is that in the minority communities, people are basically dissatisfied. They expected a lot more from the governor, although, again, he won in many of these areas. They are dissatisfied because, especially in the Hispanic community, which is the area I covered for the record, you see that, for several administrations now, Republican and Democratic administrations, Latinos, although we represent almost 10% of the state population, we are less than 1% of the state government employees. And no governor has done anything about this. And this is one of the things that we will now be looking at Whitman for, to see if she does something. In fact, today she is naming, we don't have all the names of the record yet, but she is naming all of the members of her transition team just today. And we are wondering whether there will be blacks and Hispanics in this transition team.
Miguel, before we wrap up here, what are some of the other top issues that you would like to see addressed during the Whitman administration?
Well, Whitman did not, she won, but she didn't even carry too many Latinos on her coattails. We had 2 state assemblymen. Now, as of yesterday, we will only have 1, and the one who lost, Jose Sosa, was a Republican. So now we have actually lost representation in Trenton. And so political empowerment and how she will help the minority communities gain some power will be very crucial. There are many other issues, but again, it would take a whole program. And perhaps what you can do, Mary, is tell your viewers to stay tuned, because on my program at 8 o'clock, Images Imágenes, we'll be talking about political empowerment for the Latino community.
And I was going to mention that. Thank you for mentioning it for me, Miguel.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Miguel Perez, who is a host of our own Images Imágenes. Let's get back to the telephones. Teresa in Saddlebrook, you're next.
Yes, hi.
Hello.
I just wanted to say that I supported Christy Whitman all the way. All right, I'm a registered Democrat.